Houston as the main spot because obviously the port, and then they decided to go ahead and do the paperwork. Well, when you do the paperwork for a building this massive, the government gets involved. And so when the government learned about what was trying to go on, they said, hey, we want to be a part of this. Not only are we going to help you build this, but we're also going to help pay for it partially. But we only want one thing in return. We want to use it. So of course, when the building went up, the government decided to take over at the start of the 1940s, and they ran this from the 40s to the start of the 50s as the main food production plant for everyone overseas during World War II. Now, at the end of World War II, of course, the government was like, all right, we're done, here you go, and handed it on back to Mr. Heiselau and Mr. Holland, and then this became the original Uncle Ben's rice mill facility at the start of the 1950s. So, of course, Uncle Ben's Instant Rice was made here from the 50s all the way to the mid-1980s until they moved the main headquarters back to Louisiana, and at that point, that left this building abandoned. Now, 10 years later, Carlos de Aldecoa, my boss, the gentleman that y'all know upstairs, he ended up graduating from U of H with an engineering degree, and then he needed to look for his own building to start his own coffee empire. So surprisingly, with what I found out 2 weeks after working here, with the help of my father, they ended up finding this building and closing on it in 1998. And this became Carlos's coffee empire from 1998 to 2014. He was the main coffee decaffeination provider here in the South for almost 16 years. Now, from there, he decided that he wanted to go into spirits. So 2014 to 2016, we were doing everything we could to get our actual distillery's license and go into our spirit making. In 2016, we finally got our license, and we started distilling from there. So we've been distilling for 3 years now, and we make specifically giant Texas bourbon. Now this is the fun part that I like to talk about. I like to talk about whiskey. So I want to give you all a little information about whiskey distillation and what really consists of a bourbon versus a regular American whiskey. Now, of course, distillation has been around for quite some time, since before the start of the time. So the first recording of distillation was 1000 BC, actually over in the eastern parts of Asia, and distillation was used to make perfume at the time. And of course, that was continually made all the way past Christ. And then the first recorded instance of distillation actually being used to make alcohol was in 1250 in Italy. So distillation had slowly gone over towards the west and continually went towards the west until the monks of the United Kingdom really found everything. The Scots, the Irish, and of course the English. So all the monks at the monastery basically started distilling and making alcohol. And then of course King Henry VIII comes in. King Henry VIII ended up abolishing monasteries, and that turned these monks into public distillers at that point. And at a couple years into making alcohol to the public, King Henry VIII ended up doing another blow to the monasteries and the monks and said, we're going to put a huge malt tax on what we're doing. So that drove the distillers underground. Can you grab the gate for me real quick? Food? Okay, send them upstairs to Sarah. So with that, of course, King Henry VIII put a malt tax, and that drove all the distillers underground to start making their product under the night. And with that, of course, this is where the famous name moonshine comes in. So of course, when they were making under the moonlight, they would look at their product in the barrel and say, man, look at that moonshine. And that's basically what they started calling their product to keep it under wraps with moonshine. And that's where the original name came from. Now, of course, distillation kept going, and then the Scottish started to make whiskey. Now, of course, at the time, they were basically calling it Úsca Beatha in Gaelic. Now, Úsca Beatha in Gaelic meant the nectar of life, which was aqua vita in Latin. Now, Úsca Beatha was talked about as it was being sold, but of course, just like anything that you have to say that long, it gets shorter. So Úsca Beatha got shortened down to Úsky, and then it got turned into whiskey. Now, of course, when that happened, it was spelled W-H-I-S-K-Y. And they started putting it out on the shelf. Well, then the Irish started noticing that they were selling it, and they wanted to sell it too, but they didn't have an idea on how to market it different from what the Scottish were doing. So with it, they ended up adding an E to their whiskey. So now you had two different spellings, and that showed you where you were getting your whiskey, either Ireland or Scotland. Now, of course, the Irish mixing whiskey, E-Y, was using a new style of distillation. And this new style then got translated over continually west to us. And so we were using this new style, and then of course that new style went to Canada and a lot of the new countries. And so that form of distillation of whiskey making was whiskey with an E, but the Scottish and the Japanese still use an older form of distillation, and with that they have whiskey without an E. And that's actually still a way for y'all to tell where y'all are truly getting your whiskey from. Now, with that, of course, when distillation got brought over here, we didn't have much to distill. We didn't have barley, we didn't really have wheat, we didn't really have rye. We had a lot of tobacco and we had a lot of corn. So what we did is we started just making corn whiskey at the time. And whiskey was so integral to the actual startup of the US that whiskey at one point was a currency for us during the Revolutionary War. Now, from there, of course, corn whiskey continually got made, but it wasn't recorded first until it started being put out by Elijah Craig and the Craig family as corn whiskey made in Bourbon County. Now, when that started happening, they were saying, oh, look, it's corn whiskey from Bourbon, or Bourbon whiskey. And that's just kind of how it went on. So Bourbon became bourbon, and then everyone started making their corn whiskey as bourbon whiskey. And the first report happened that was about 1840, but it did not become the true American spirit until 1960. And when that happened, then we got a lot of regulations. And so with that, we have 5 main rules that we have to follow for us to call what we make bourbon. Of course, the first one being it has to be in the US. The second one has to be over 51% corn. Now, rules number 3, 4, and 5 are all based around how it's aged and how it goes through its aging process. And so rule number 3 is you cannot have any additives or preservatives added to your whiskey to change the coloring or the flavoring. You have to barrel it at no higher than 125 proof. It has to be barreled in a brand new charred American oak barrel every single time. And those are the 5 basic rules of bourbon as we know today. Now with that, let's go ahead and go to our main distillation hall so I can show you how we make our giant Texas bourbon.